Level 1. The recruit. Nobody makes it. There are 200 men at the assessment site. You know statistically that fewer than 20 of you will still be here in 3 weeks. You've heard the numbers. You've read everything available, which isn't much because Delta Force doesn't publish manuals about itself. What you know comes from men who hinted at things they couldn't say directly, and from the specific weight of reputation that the unit carries without ever discussing itself. The assessment begins without ceremony, no speech, no welcome. An NCO appears and tells you to be ready to move in 10 minutes with full kit. You move in 9. The first phase is land navigation. You are given a map, a compass, and a series of points spread across terrain that has been specifically selected for being miserable. Ridgelines, creek beds, dense vegetation, elevation changes that appear modest on paper and are brutal in reality. You carry a rucksack whose weight is not specified and which turns out to be significantly heavier than you expected. You move alone, no team, no one to pace off, no one to share the weight of the decision-making that navigation in bad terrain requires. It is you and the map and the ground and the distance between where you are and where you need to be. Day 1, you hit every point. Day 3, your feet are destroyed. The boots that were perfectly broken in have found new ways to destroy you over extended movement with weight. You tape what needs taping and you keep moving. Day 7. A man next to you at the water point sits down and doesn't get up. He hands his kit to the evaluator. He's done. He doesn't look broken. He just looks like a man who has finished something. You understand watching him that selection isn't primarily physical. The physical removes the people who can't sustain effort over time. What it's actually measuring is harder to name. The relationship between a person and discomfort. The specific question of whether you stop when things hurt or only when you literally cannot continue. You keep moving. Level 2, the candidate selection hell. Week 2 and you've stopped counting the men who are gone. The attrition happens quietly. Men appear at water points and then don't appear. You don't know if they quit or were cut. The evaluators don't tell you, and you don't ask. Asking signals that you're paying attention to something other than the task in front of you. The tasks multiply. Land navigation at night with shorter time windows. Shooting assessments under conditions designed to introduce stress, fatigue, time pressure, the specific shakiness that extended physical effort produces in hands that need to be still. Psychological evaluations unlike any psych eval you've encountered. Not screening for disqualifying conditions, but mapping how you think, how you process ambiguity, how you perform when the right answer isn't clear and the wrong answer has consequences. You are being measured in dimensions you didn't know you had. The cadre are present and observing and almost entirely silent. They don't encourage, they don't criticize, they watch. Their silence is its own pressure. You have no feedback loop, no indication of whether you're doing well or poorly, no external validation of any kind. This is deliberate. Delta operates in environments where there is no feedback loop, where you make decisions with incomplete information and no guarantee the decision was right until long after the moment has passed. Selection is measuring whether you can function in that environment, not just physically, but psychologically. On day 19, a cadre member tells you to report to a building you haven't been to before. There is a chair. There is a man across a desk. He looks at you for a long moment. "Welcome to Delta," he says. You nod. You don't cry. You don't celebrate. You feel something quieter, the specific satisfaction of having passed through something real and come out the other side. Training starts Monday. You go find somewhere to sleep. Level 3, the operator, Tier 1. The operator training course is 18 months long. By the end of it, you will be the most comprehensively trained soldier in the United States military. That's not arrogance. It's the institutional reality of what Delta invests in each operator. You learn advanced marksmanship beyond anything in your Ranger experience. Shooting from vehicles, from helicopters, in low light, in no light, with your non-dominant hand, through glass, at moving targets from moving platforms. You shoot thousands of rounds a week until the mechanics are so deep in your muscle memory that conscious thought is no longer part of the process. You learn close quarters battle, clearing buildings room by room with a team, the choreography of it, the communication that happens without words, the specific controlled aggression that makes a 4-man stack through a fatal funnel survivable. You learn it until you can do it in the dark, in a gas mask, with your heart rate at 170. You learn languages, medicine that borders on surgery, driving that no instructor teaches. You learn to work with pilots, with intelligence officers, with diplomats in environments where those relationships determine outcomes. At the end of 18 months, you are assessed again. You pass. You are an operator. You are 28 years old, and you are one of approximately 250 men in the world who hold this designation. You don't tell your family what you do. Your mother thinks you're still with the Rangers. You let her think that. Level 4. The Assaulter. Direct action. Your first real operation is a hostage rescue in a country you are not going to name. The intelligence has been building for 3 weeks. A Western aid worker taken by a group operating in a region where the host government has limited control and limited interest in exercising it. The window for recovery is 48 hours. You rehearse the assault on a mock-up built to the exact dimensions of the target building. 20 times in daylight, 20 times in darkness. By the 40th rehearsal, every man on the team knows exactly where he's going, what he's doing, and what the man next to him is doing simultaneously. The operation takes 11 minutes from first breach to exfil. 11 minutes that your body processes differently from any 11 minutes you've experienced. Time moving at a speed that is both faster and slower than normal. The heightened clarity that extreme stress produces. The way training takes over and lets the trained part of your brain run without interference from the thinking part. The hostage is recovered, unharmed. 4 combatants killed. No American casualties. The debrief takes longer than the operation. You sit in a room and walk through every decision, every action, every second of those 11 minutes in exhaustive detail. What was correct? What could have been better? What the contingency would have been if X had happened instead of Y? Delta doesn't celebrate. Delta analyzes. You deploy 6 times in the next 2 years, each one different, each debrief the same. Level 5. The Sniper, the last voice you never hear. You cross-train to the sniper section. The decision takes 6 months to make. You're good at direct action. You like the team dynamic, the speed of it, but the sniper role pulls at something in you, the patience it requires, the precision, the intelligence dimension that direct action doesn't have in the same way. You discover you're better at it than you were at direct action. The marksmanship is only part of it. Sniper teams are the eyes of an operation, positioned hours before the main force, reporting what they see, shaping the intelligence picture that commanders use to make decisions. You become a sensor as much as a weapon. You are inserted into a position 12 hours before an assault. You watch the target building. You count the guards. You note the rotation times. You identify the alert ones and the ones who are not. You transmit in real time to the team that is waiting in the dark somewhere behind you. When the assault begins, you cover the exfil route. You watch for threats the assaulters can't see from their position. You are the eye in the back of the operation's head. You make 2 shots on 2 separate deployments. Both were necessary. Both were correct. You think about both of them, not constantly. You've learned to manage where your thoughts go and when, but they're there, filed in the part of you that holds the things that happened and can't unhappen. You don't regret them. You understand them. That's not the same thing. Level 6. The team leader, the weight of the call. You are 34 and you lead a team. 12 operators. Men you've served with, trained with, deployed alongside. Men whose capabilities you know better than they know their own in some respects. You know who performs best under which kind of pressure. You know whose judgment you trust when the situation is ambiguous. The team leader's job is not to be the best operator on the team. It's to make the team perform at its ceiling. Those are different things, and confusing them is a leadership error that Delta doesn't make twice. You plan the operations. You sit with intelligence officers for hours going through everything that's known, and everything that's inferred, and everything that's uncertain. You make the plan and brief it and rehearse it and adapt it when new information changes the picture, which it always does, because intelligence is always incomplete and the enemy always has a vote. The call that still sits with you, an operation in a denied area. Intelligence suggesting 2 high-value targets in a compound. The window is closing. You make the call to go. Inside there are 3 people, not 2. The third is a young man, late teens, armed, who raises his weapon. Your men respond correctly. The debrief confirms the call was within parameters. You replay it anyway, at 3 a.m. in the specific silence of a forward operating base. You make the same call every time. That doesn't make 3 a.m. easier. You've stopped expecting it to. Level 7, the squadron commander, the man who plans the impossible. You command a squadron now, 200 men, multiple teams, the full operational spectrum of a Delta Force element, direct action, hostage rescue, special reconnaissance, counter-proliferation. You plan the operations that the teams execute. The teams execute brilliantly. Your job is to give them something worth executing. The planning process for major operations takes weeks. You work with CIA, NSA, DIA, the Geographic Combatant Commands, the policy level of the Pentagon. You sit in rooms with people whose titles don't appear on organizational charts and whose authorities aren't in any public document. You understand now the full architecture of what Delta is. Not just a unit, but a capability, a tool that the National Command Authority reaches for when the situation requires precision that conventional forces can't provide and sensitivity that conventional operations can't accommodate. You've been read into compartments you didn't know existed. The information you carry daily is staggering in its sensitivity. You live with it the way you live with everything in this career, by developing the discipline of not thinking about work during hours when thinking about work doesn't help, and thinking about it with absolute focus during the hours when it does. Your wife has been married to this job for 12 years. Your kids are 11 and 8. They know you're in the army. They don't know what that means. You make it to most of the important things. Most. Level 8, the Ghost Operator, officially retired. You left Delta 3 years ago. On paper. What actually happened is more complicated. You transitioned out of the uniformed military into a space that exists between the government and the private sector, a contractor relationship that provides services to agencies that need Delta-level capability with Delta-level deniability, and without the institutional constraints of the military chain of command. You are 47 years old. You work for an organization with a name that appears in no public database. Your clients are agencies whose budgets contain line items that members of Congress have limited visibility into. The work is the same planning, the same requirements for precision and silence, the same zero margin for error. You live simply, a house in a mid-sized city, a cover identity substantive enough to hold up to casual scrutiny. You have a dog. You run 6 miles every morning out of habit that has become identity. You've been running 6 miles every morning since Ranger School, and the morning you don't will mean something is seriously wrong. The loneliness is different at this level from the loneliness you felt at earlier levels. Earlier, it was the loneliness of a man who couldn't talk about his work. Now it's the loneliness of a man who doesn't officially exist, whose presence in any given place, if acknowledged, would create problems for people in positions you respect. You've learned to find it peaceful rather than isolating most days. Level 9, the Director, the Architect of Shadows. You are 55 years old and you sit in a building that appears on no organizational chart. You oversee a capability that the American government uses regularly and acknowledges never. Your operators are scattered across 6 continents. Your budget flows through mechanisms specifically designed to be untraceable to their destination. Your operations produce outcomes that occasionally appear in newspapers attributed to causes that are not you. You brief people whose names are known globally. They listen to you with complete attention. You have sat across tables from presidents, not in ceremonial contexts, in operational ones, where what you're about to say determines what happens in a country that will feel the effects for a generation. The weight of this is something you stopped feeling as weight a long time ago. It became normal the way everything becomes normal, through repetition, through the daily grinding familiarity of sitting with enormous responsibility, until sitting with enormous responsibility is just what sitting feels like. You have lost operators. Not many. Delta's loss rate is extraordinarily low relative to the operational tempo, but not zero. The men you've lost, their faces are in a part of your memory that doesn't fade and doesn't update. They remain exactly as they were the last time you saw them, frozen, while the world continues around them. You attended every funeral that was possible to attend without compromising the security of the unit. Some weren't possible. Those are the ones you carry heaviest. You are the most powerful person most people have never heard of. You find this neither satisfying nor troubling. It simply is. Level 10. The legend, the man who was never there. You are 62 years old and you have been retired for 4 years. Actually retired this time. The contractor work ended when the knee did. A training injury finally caught up with you. The accumulated debt of 40 years of physical abuse presented for payment all at once. The surgeon was honest. You accepted the honesty. You live in a small town in Montana. Mountains. Quiet. The specific silence of a place that has no operational significance to anyone and therefore no reason for anyone to be watching it. You chose it deliberately. Old habits. You have a garden. This surprises you every morning, that you, who spent 35 years in the most kinetic profession that exists, now spend significant mental energy on the question of whether the tomatoes are getting enough water. They usually are. Your children are adults. Your daughter is a doctor in Seattle. Your son is in the army. Infantry, not special operations, and you feel something complicated about this that you haven't fully resolved. Pride and terror in the same breath. The specific fear of a man who knows exactly what the institution can ask of a person. He doesn't ask you for advice often. When he does, you give him the only thing you actually learned in 40 years that can be transmitted in words. Do your job completely. Trust the men next to you completely. Everything else is noise. He nods like he understands. You hope he does. Your file, the real one, not the sanitized official record, is classified at a level that will not be declassified in your lifetime. The operations you ran, the outcomes you produced, the capabilities you built, they will remain in a vault somewhere, read by people with the right clearances, unavailable to the historians who will eventually try to understand this period. You are a gap in the record. A blank space where something happened that can't be named. Some nights you sit on the porch and watch the mountains in the dark and you think about the boy who showed up at Fort Bragg with a bag and a letter that didn't say Delta Force. That boy had no idea. You wouldn't warn him even if you could. The not knowing was the point. The not knowing is what let him walk through the door. Somewhere tonight, a ranger is opening a letter. It doesn't say Delta Force. It never says Delta Force. It gives him a date, a location, a list of what to bring. He reads it 3 times. He doesn't tell anyone where he's going. He packs his bag. He shows up. He has no idea what's waiting on the other side of the assessment. He has no idea what it will make of him.